Welcome to today's lesson, Recommending Wine. In this lesson, we will cover the 2 keys to recommending wine, the 4 core questions when recommending wine to customers, and the common miscommunications between you and your customers. There are 2 keys to recommending wine: knowing your product and knowing your customer. Knowing your product is what every other part of this training process is about, which has included everything about wine, its components, pairing with food, and proper aging and storing techniques. We will focus mainly on the next key, knowing your customer. Buying wine for an event or for dinner can be a very personal process. When focusing on getting to know your customer and their needs, there are 4 core questions that you must consider when recommending wine. These 4 questions are: who is drinking the wine? What are they eating? What do they want to spend? And finally, why are they drinking? You must think of these questions as starting points to learn about your customer's needs. Now let's look at these 4 core questions a bit closer and discuss some possible follow-up questions to each core question. The first core question is, who is drinking the wine? When asking who will be enjoying the wine, we think of 3 follow-up questions. Are they big wine drinkers? This matters because people who are new to wine normally prefer name brands that they know, cheaper wines, and wines with a lot of fruit, alcohol, and sugar. How many people will be drinking wine? This matters because the number of people will indicate how much wine they will require. This may also change if they are big wine drinkers, because they may change the order to consume a larger volume of wine, possibly with various formats. What do they normally drink? This is one of the most important questions you can ask, because most people enjoy drinking wines that they have had before. This single question can make a recommendation very simple. The second core question is, what are they eating? When we consider what our guests will be eating, we look at 3 possibilities. Is there going to be a full menu? This matters because if the guests have a variety of foods, they may want wines with more range for pairing. Are the guests only ordering appetizers? This matters because if they only have one dish or a charcuterie, the wine can be matched closer and be more defined to their palate. Are the guests only going to be ordering wine? This matters because if the guests are drinking their wine without food, they are likely to prefer New World wines because they are smoother, with lower tannin levels, making them easier to drink without the accompaniment of food. The third core question is, what do they want to spend? Price can be a very personal topic for a guest, and it is also very subjective. Never assume that the guest will pay more or less for wine. This matters because customers respond to the core question with, I would like to order something reasonably priced, or not too expensive. This can cause confusion as reasonable to one person can mean $7 and to another person can mean $700. Most people are hesitant to discuss price in front of their guests, so you don't want to push them to answer this question. The best method is to let them guide you. One way of allowing the guest to guide you is to suggest a wine and gauge their reaction. If they hesitate, suggest something in a slightly lower price range until you hit that sweet spot where everyone is happy. The fourth and final core question is, why are they drinking? When considering why the guests are drinking wine, we typically look at the occasion of the gathering. Is this a wedding reception? This matters because wedding customers usually need sparkling wine. These guests tend to be very anxious about the big day, but often order large amounts of wine. Guests will also usually pre-order their wine. Is this for a large event? This matters because often with these types of events, guests want to have wines to meet each group of their guest needs. They may also order less expensive wines to satisfy the large group's thirst and order a few pricey bottles for themselves. Is this for a gift? This matters because gift wines are usually pricier than regular purchases. When recommending gift wine, focus on the gift recipient's desires. You will most likely recommend a very good, well-known, or highly rated wine, or at least one with a great pedigree. Ask questions about the recipient. Do they like name brand and famous wines, or something a bit quirky? Now that we have wrapped up the 4 core questions on recommending wine, let's look at the common miscommunications when speaking with your guest about wine. Often when a customer is explaining what they're looking for in a wine, there will be some confusion. Remember that most times, the customer may not know the proper wine terminology. They probably did not receive any formal education on wine, but are just people looking for a great wine to enjoy. This can lead to miscommunication regarding wine descriptions. Always try to find the connection between what they are saying and what they actually mean. The 2 most common miscommunications are sweet versus fruitiness, and what smooth, heavy, and rich mean to the guest. Many people often confuse sweetness, which is also known as residual sugar, with fruit. Fruit simply means the fruit characteristics we find in specific types of wine, while sweet refers to the amount of residual sugar left in the wine. If you suspect that your guest may be confusing the 2 terms, just ask them what they normally drink. If they say they like Pinot Noir or Cabernet Sauvignon, you can assume they enjoy the fruitiness of wine. If they say they like Moscato, Riesling, or dessert wines such as port, you can safely assume they enjoy the residual sugar in wine. When a guest asks for a smooth, heavy, or rich wine, they may be looking for a high alcohol wine or a high tannic wine. The issue arises here because not all wines share both of these 2 characteristics. You can always ask them what they normally drink and allow them to guide your recommendation. If your guests say that they normally drink California Cabernet Sauvignon or Petit Syrah, you can assume that they like high alcohol and high tannin wines. If they say they drink Bordeaux wines or Barolos, you can assume they enjoy only the high tannin in wine. Here are a few tips on differentiating between smooth, heavy, and rich wines. Smoothness comes from high alcohol and/or oak use. Heaviness comes from high residual sugar and/or tannin, which is increased by oak use. And richness comes from high alcohol, high residual sugar, and/or tannin, which is increased by oak use. So let's quickly recap today's lesson, wine recommendations. There are 2 important keys to recommending wine, knowing your product and knowing your customer, which lead to the 4 core questions along with their follow-up questions. The 4 core questions to consider when recommending wine are: who is drinking the wine? What are they eating? What do they want to spend? And why are they drinking? Each of these are essential in getting to know your customer's needs. And finally, when recommending wine, there is sure to be some confusion due to the lack of formal wine education when describing wine's characteristics. Try to connect what your guest says with what they actually mean. They may be confusing sweet with fruity and smooth with heavy and rich. The best way to get a good understanding is to ask the guest what they normally drink. This should guide you to the perfect wine for them. And that is the end of the lesson, Wine Recommendations. Don't forget to check out the information and resources available in the course site. If you have any questions, you can always ask your teachers. See you in class!